Together, the Bible says how good it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. We are now faced with a new day, and there is a new team. The Bible declares he told Joshua, arise. There's a charge, Joshua, to take the people over to Jordan, take them to Canaan into their promised land. But first thing God began to tell Joshua, you must be encouraged because there is a great task and there is a great enemy before you that wants to claim the grounds of the territory. But God knew Joshua. He said, Joshua, my servant Moses is dead. Arise and take the people over this Jordan. And there I will give you victory. There I will go before you. There I'll make ways out of no way. There you will acknowledge me and I will direct your path. So Father, we thank you today that we're here together in a brand new day for what God is about to do. There is a new team, there is a new mandate, and there is a new day. Father, I thank you for what you are about to do with this team. God, we thank you, Lord God, for our Prime Minister. We thank you for Madam Speaker. We thank you for those a member of Parliament, God. This is a new team that you have selected. The same way you've chosen Daniel, you've chosen Joshua, you've chosen Joseph, God, to lead the people, Lord God, because they were faced with taskmasters. So, Father, we thank you and we praise you for what you are about to do. Touch every member in this place and do what only you can do, God. We lift you up now in this place and do what only you can do. We thank you, Father. We thank you for your power resting upon them now. Go before them and break up the fallow grounds. Break up every enemy that they shall be faced with. And we won't forget to give you glory, praise, and honor because you are a mighty God. Repeat after me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Philip Davis, Chester Cooper, Frederick Mitchell, Glennis Hannah Martin, Obadiah Wilstrom, Alfred Sayers, Dr. Michael Darrell, Clay Lee, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, Jobeth Colby Davis, Ginger Moxie, Mario Boulay, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles Larota, Pierre Blow, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightborn, Dr. Good Minutes, Jamal Strong, John Finley, Marcus Rose, Dion Lundy, Herb Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightborn, Gaslia Miller Bryce, Leroy Major, Sylvanus Kenny, Mikhail Bonnelly, Michael Pintar, James Crazy Thompson, Aaron Lewis, Shannon Don Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian White. Members.
Thank you. Honorable members, I am befouled by the complicity of the reprehensible crime of child rape and abuse, and that has sent reverberating shockwaves throughout our moral society. Beautiful Bello was tragically stripped of her innocence and robbed of a future to become a pioneer in our society. As a mother, I am appalled and mortified. And as Speaker of the House, I urge my fellow parliamentary colleagues to join me in protesting such heinous acts so as to protect our precious ones. I extend heartfelt condolences to the family of little Bella. A moment of silence in her honor. Thank you, honorable members. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery, number 2 amendment, number 17, order 2021.
Can I have order that the document be brought up? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm wondering whether or not the minister, the member for Exuma and Ragged Island, would be ready to lay on the table the article he referenced in the last sitting with respect to the Free National Movement having laid off 25 workers at a savings of $75 million. I'm just...
The chair recognizes the honorable member for West
Well, the
Bahama.
business is being proceeded with now. When that arises, the member will address it.
Wait, remember this was outside. I just was addressing the member to the chair.
But we're in the order of the business.
Leader of the opposition, you could be that.
Honorable member for Marco City. We will have that addressed, and we will do it as we move forward in the order of business. Is that okay?
Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the bill be laid on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Statements and okay. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Public Holidays National Heroes Day 2021, opening of shops notice 2021.
Order that the document be brought. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Statements and communications by ministers. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writ. Presentations of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills.
Member moves the first reading of bills. The leader of the opposition and I have spoken, and we've agreed to allow for the laying of the COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Bill 2021, allow for its first reading and then subsequent debate during this session this morning.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honorable member
Madam,
for St. Anne's.
thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Leader of Opposition Business concurs with Leader of Government Business on that. Obliged.
Thank you, honorable members. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act.
Is there a second? Foxell, honorable member Foxell has seconded. Order that the bill be brought forward. Order that the bill do lie on the It has been moved and seconded It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those that oppose will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act.
For the first reading of bills, the chair recognizes the member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following. A bill for an act to provide for the transition and consequences of the suspension of certain enactments under the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Special Provisions Order 2021.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order the bill be brought forward. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time and tabled. A bill for an act to provide for the transition and consequences of the suspension of certain enactments under the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Special Provisions Order 2021. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time.
A bill for an act to provide for the transition and consequences of the suspension of certain enactments under the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Special Provisions Order 2021.
For the first reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exuma and Ragged Island. Freetown. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, I rise to move the second reading of a bill for an act to provide for the transition and consequences of the suspension of certain enactments under the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Special Provisions Order 2021. Madam Speaker, so that the people may know why this is necessary and why their business is being done in this fashion. The pandemic was well known, was unanticipated. The reaction to it had to be measured. At the time, the leader of the opposition in this place and in the Senate advised a very short period of a state of emergency. Alas, Madam Speaker, we are still in a state of emergency. But as the honourable member for Cat Island, Rumkey and San Salvador promised the Bahamian people, we would not continue a state of emergency, and come November 13th, the state of emergency will end. Had the then government paid heed to the advice given by senior legislators, senior lawyers, there would be no need at this time for this bill. They did not listen then, and so we are compelled to act now. The fact of the matter, Madam Speaker, is this honorable place is charged pursuant to Article 52(1) of the Constitution to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of this country. The regime adopted and continued up to the 13th of November is an aberration to parliamentary procedure. It is to be used sparingly and for short periods. As a result, Article 29(2) of the Constitution with regard states of emergency provide that laws made pursuant to those provisions end when the state of emergency ends. And so, had heed been paid to the then opposition, we could have proceeded a long time ago with ordinary parliamentary steps, and the need to now extend certain provisions would not have arisen. That having been said, the Emergency Orders COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Special Provision Order of 2021, not made in this place, suspended a number of provisions. The advice to the government is that those suspensions die with the state of emergency. It creates issues and problems, and this bill addresses them. We trust, Madam Speaker, that this is a matter over which there will be no controversy. The first issue to be addressed is the issue of local government elections. These ought to have happened in June of 2020. The order suspended them, and by Section 4 of the proposed bill, it is being sought that they be further extended for 90 days to permit the orderly conduct of elections to local government. The same applies, Madam Speaker, to school board elections, and the same extension of 90 days is provided by Section 5. Madam Speaker, the emergency regulation also suspended the need to renew work permits, annual residence, and other permits under the Immigration Act. Come November 13, when the state of emergency ends, that suspension will also end. And persons who would have acted with faith with that provision of the regulation may find themselves in difficulties. The regulation provided a 30-day period after the end of the state of emergency to renew. Unfortunately, the order will seek to have any effect on the 14th of November, and the full implications of the law will apply. In order to address and safeguard those persons who acted in good faith, Section 6 of the bill provides for a 90-day period for those persons to make the necessary applications to regularize their positions in this country. Lastly, Madam Speaker, the emergency regulation suspended the provisions of the Data Protection Act in order to permit the National Insurance Board to share with money transmission services personal details of insured persons. That order also provided for that suspension of the provision of the Data Protection Act as indicated at the end of the period come November 14th. The board and the money transmission services would have a difficulty as they would be in breach of the Data Protection Act. The remedy that we advance, Madam Speaker, is in Section 7 and provides a 90-day period for the board and the money transmission services to resolve a way forward. In the interim and at all times, the money transmission service will have to keep the information confidential. Madam Speaker, the member for Marco City implored us to point out bad behavior when we saw it, not to emulate it, and to only act properly. I can assure him that unlike in the past, when the advice of an eminent Queen's Counsel was disregarded in this place about how we ought to proceed, on this side we will listen, we will heed, and when possible we will act. We find ourselves in this position wholly because the advice, the counsel of the very learned member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador was disregarded and confined to the waste bin. It is not the way that we ought to do business. And I'm quite sure that that member, that eminent learned member being now in the chair, will have no difficulties proceeding in a proper manner. And so I so move, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a seconder? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Centerville.
The second in that regard. Firstly, Madam Speaker, I think it important to speak to the commitment of this administration to end the state of emergency. And in 7 short weeks, we have delivered on an enormous commitment. And this legislation is the final part of that commitment. This legislation, Madam Speaker, is exactly why we need to end the state of emergency. And the government governing in a way contrary to the normal laws of the Bahamas. The end of the state of emergency and transition into legislative normality with a pandemic is not easy. The former administration probably couldn't figure out how to do it. They took the easy way out and just simply kept extending the emergency orders. But we, Madam Speaker, have made a brave commitment, and we took a different direction. We made brave but cautious steps. Which have led us here today. And yes, it is a change. But with the change, it also requires smooth transition. Coming out of a state of emergency, we don't have the discretion to make laws without the input of the people. And Madam Speaker, I can add that the Attorney General, who was in another place, consulted with all the relevant agencies to ensure that this legislation was a collaborative effort. We wanted to change the old status quo, and that's why this legislation is required. Governing in a respectful manner in this house, the people's house. This bill is required for a smooth transition to normalcy and the fulfillment of this new day government in one of its core promises to the people. This bill addresses local government and school board elections, permits and visas issued under the Immigration Act, which expired during the state of public emergency, and the use of protected data by NIB for paying benefits. We wish to make it clear these items were constitutionally suspended by the previous government, but we are ensuring a proper transition after the expiration of the state of emergency. As per local government and school board elections, these elections are to be held within 90 days, and the minister intends to hold them in the first quarter of 2022. Consequently, adequate time is needed to be able to conduct fair and successful elections. This is the purpose of this amendment. The same pertains to school board elections. We have had general elections. There is no reason not to give time to conduct proper local government and school board elections. As per NIB, paying benefits through money transmission services in contravention of the Data Protection Act, we would want NIB to continue to pay these benefits electronically, as we believe Bahamians need continuity in payments and efficiency of how it is being conducted. This amendment provides a 3-month window to set up the appropriate system to enable it to do so. Bahamians are heard, Madam Speaker, and we have the obligation to ensure that support structures are not interrupted. There was no plan to address this in motion, but this is a new day, and there is a plan now. There was also the question of how much time is to be given to persons to renew permits and visas which expired during the pandemic. Under the state of emergency, work permits that expired during the state of emergency will automatically toll. It certainly would be a shock to have unintended violators of the immigration law. It is quite simply the right thing to do to allow renewal applications to be made. These applications will be assessed according to the policies and procedures of the Department of Immigration. In this regard, we have been advised a 3-month transition period is appropriate. All those with work permits and visas which have expired during the state of emergency but have not sought their renewal should do so immediately. Madam Speaker, it is as clear as glass as to how important this bill is. With this being said, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those involved in the law reform. They have worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic and throughout this process. Additionally, Madam Speaker, I would also wish to take this opportunity, as you have done, to publicly offer condolences to the family of Deonia Bella Walker. Princess Bella was also a resident of Centerville, and this situation has certainly touched the hearts of not only our community, but our entire country. Madam Speaker, I want to take this time to mention and to reaffirm my commitment as minister to pass and strengthen the necessary laws to enhance the protection of our most vulnerable amongst us, our children. It is our desire to see the enhancement of the administration of justice in this regard through the creation of a sexual offenses court. Madam Speaker, I have practiced in our legal system for over 16 years, and I know firsthand the challenges it faces. I wish to take this opportunity to say that the AG and I will do our endeavor best not to interfere in the judicial process, but to ensure that all and sundry have the necessary tools to enable the smooth, swift, and equitable dispensation of justice in our Bahama land. We aim to be the best salt and pepper combination this country has ever seen. Madam Speaker, my 100-year-old grandmother is at home watching Sybil Archer, and she always impresses upon me that despite how many persons achieve P&P, we in fact, are all contractual workers whose contracts are up for review every 5 years. And based on that review, determines whether we sit here or there, or if we even sit at all. So while, Madam Speaker, we are in this honorable house, let us do what is necessary for the benefit of those on the outside. Because one day, Madam Speaker, we will find that our time here will expire. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the transition and consequences of the suspension of certain enactments under the Emergency Powers Order 2021. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, once again, I'd like to say thanks to Almighty God for this opportunity to be here. Madam Speaker, as a 19-year-old student at the College of the Bahamas, I, along with some members, I believe, in this House, were part of a group that spoke on Sudden Recreation Ground. It was one of the largest rallies back then. Madam Speaker, we were there to call for stiffer penalties for rape offenders, and I represented young people from the College of the Bahamas and elsewhere. Madam Speaker, it's been a long, painful journey for Bahamians in general, but certainly for Bahamian women in particular, who have suffered the indignity of violence in general, but sexual violence as well. Madam Speaker, our children have over time been subjected to extreme, horrific treatment, many times by persons who they love, and even some who've given birth to them. And we have a tendency, Madam Speaker, in the Bahamas to be moved by a tragedy in the moment. And then we slip back into the inertia that has prevented us as a country from making meaningful changes in a timely fashion. It is my prayer, as we seek justice for Bella, and that we would move in this House with the haste required. One of the issues that have come up in the aftermath of this tragedy, Madam Speaker, is the issue of us as a Parliament being responsive to real concerns in real time. And I think all administrations have missed opportunities. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to act in a bipartisan way, to look at those petitions that have been before us as a country before, and it would be a powerful thing for members of the governing side with so much talent and promise to join with the opposition in answering this call. I recall a horrific homicide years ago, and I would not reference it in particular. I would only say that during that time, some conclusions were drawn in the judiciary that said that that particular case was not the worst of the worst. Therefore, it didn't warrant a certain punishment being called for by the public. And I believe in the aftermath of that, one of the discussions was that we ought to offer at least guidelines, some parameters within which judges may then act. Madam Speaker, we are back at that point where we have to send a clear message to the general public, perpetrators as well as victims, that we have had enough as a country and that we are prepared to do something fundamentally different. It is a painful thing, the kind of carnage that we have in the Bahamas, in our homes, on our streets, but we continue on as a country almost immune to what is happening, but we have a chance. And so I extend on behalf of my family and residents of Marco City and Grand Bahama, because certainly in Grand Bahama there are many persons who are also grieving, because it has opened fresh wounds for many mothers and fathers and siblings of persons who have been victimized by violence, especially sexual violence. Madam Speaker, today the members of the official opposition share the view that this is a matter that ought not in any way be a controversial matter, that as a matter of course we should proceed and support the COVID-19 pandemic special provisions bill of 2021. And so Madam Speaker, let me signal from the beginning that we certainly in support of it. Some of the commentary that has accompanied its presentation, we have a different recollection and view on, but nevertheless. Madam Speaker, this is not a brand new consideration. I certainly support the view that the Parliament ought to oversee these kinds of matters. That's not a controversial issue for the member for Marco City. The previous administration, our administration, pivoted, as you would be aware. So I suspect that the member for Centerville may not have recalled that we in fact addressed this particular issue. And so we're going through now the pieces of legislation that will come later, the health services and management of community spread rules, the health services general rules. So we're going through this now because we think that the challenges may be in the details, and already there are some that unfortunately signal that if we were to embrace what is being termed a landmark legislation, overdue legislation, that we may very well be replacing the competent authority, and in the way that the government, when opposition spoke about it, it was in a very pejorative way, but certainly there are some draconian measures in this particular bill and some troublesome articles that we'll have an opportunity to discuss. And so what we may unintentionally be doing is transferring the authority that was resident in the member for Kalani to the member for Tall Pines. And so I certainly look forward to having a discussion about this particular bill, and I'll reference one or two aspects of it before I take my seat. But the point I'm making is that this is not entirely new. The administration table, the public health and emergency preparedness management bill of 2021. And so the public should not buy the characterization that in 7 weeks the new government has come in and the very thing it conceptualized, it is now put on the table of the House. The truth is, we were certainly on our way in making those adjustments. If you were to argue that it was late in coming, I don't think you're going to get any major argument, certainly not from the member for Marco City, because I certainly believe the Parliament ought to oversee the management of these matters, and of course, the relevant minister. And Madam Speaker, if I could just pause for a moment, just to pivot on a particular point. As I mentioned, the Parliament and the role As I mentioned, the Parliament and the role it ought to play. Madam Speaker, there are others who have been in this place much longer than myself, so I don't pretend to have a monopoly on how the Parliament ought to function and the importance of all of its members having their say. But it is disconcerting. The opposition has 7 members, and if the trend continues, it's likely to grow during this session. But let me say, Madam Speaker, the pastor would ask, could it be you? Or you? But Madam Speaker, we have to make a decision that demonstrates, as the member for Exuma and Ragged Island like to say, that we believe we're engaging in serious business. Members of the opposition have to scramble many times to have the full complement of its members seated in the chamber. This is 2021. Members, and not just members of the opposition, members of the governing party. We are on rotation to represent our constituents. In 2021, members of Parliament are on rotation. I would implore the government, as I implored the last government, that it is unacceptable for us to continue to be rotating and maybe having to jump up and substitute with somebody else to speak, or you're downstairs in the smokers room. This is 2021. We can engage in a debate on whether or not all of our discussions need to be in this place, because we treat this ground as some sort of hollowed ground. But the discussion has to be had, and action should be taken where all members of Parliament ought to have an opportunity in real time, at the same time, to represent their constituents. And so I would say to West, Grand Bahama, and Bimini, that at the earliest possible moment, as you have a discussion with the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of the Bahamas, that we come back and solve what hasn't been solved before. Because it really does not make sense. You spend, I'm sure, not very much money in an opening that, of course, violated every COVID protocol in the history of COVID. When we opened Parliament, I think we had probably about 50,000 persons present. Sorry, it could have been smaller. It may have been 2,000 or 3,000. But for a moment, for an occasion, we staged Parliament. We did the people's business. Everybody present. We ought to do that again so everyone can engage in what they have fought hard and have been elected for. And so it is my hope that you'd come back with good news and we'd be able to resolve this matter. Madam Speaker, then and now, I believe when we have a chance to discuss the 2 bills that I referenced, we'll talk about then and now. Then being the position taken by the opposition, that's now the government, and what that position is now. I just want to highlight just 1 or 2 quick things before I sit down. The vaccination rate, unfortunately, Madam Speaker, appears to be dropping. I'm uncertain, and I'm sure the Minister of Health will clarify, because I'm certainly interested in what accounts for the rate that Bahamians are now getting vaccination. I believe we've fallen off, if I'm not incorrect, from somewhere maybe around 1,000 or so a day. We're down to probably 500. I'm not sure, member for Tall Pines, whether it's an issue of persons simply don't have access to the vaccines. I find that difficult to understand because we have, I'm advised, what adequate supplies in country. Could it be that the promotion is not as vigorous as it ought to be? But it's a worrisome trend, and I'm hoping that it does not continue. Now, I remember before the election, the government side, then opposition, was adamant that one of the things that was critical is testing, and then of course, you supported the vaccination as well, but very quietly. We have an opportunity. Yes, by all means.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Tall Pines.
Thank you so much. I didn't really want to stop the member because I know him quite well. We have served in the Senate together on many occasions. And some
I'm from Grand Bahamas.
No, I'm actually from Nassau, but Grand Bahamas is second home.
Maybe you abandoned the people of Grand Bahamas?
Never have, and never will. But I just want to set the record straight because the facts are the facts.
Okay.
I lived two places for a long period of time. I love Grand Bahama. So have you. You're a Nassauvian who was in Grand Bahama, so we share a similar cause and maybe one day a similar fate. But the reality is that, yeah, the member did speak about our vaccination program, and in one instance, he is absolutely correct. We, along with the Pan American Health Organization, is very concerned with our numbers of vaccination in the last 2 to 3 weeks. We are beginning to see a fall, and like any responsible government and any responsible ministry, it is our responsibility to begin to explore all of the reasons why. One of the things that we have noticed is that the largest centers, which is reflective of centers across the globe, are not as effective at this stage now that we have passed 40%. And it is our responsibility to now go to the people in smaller, different vaccination, mobile units, different places, to make life easier for individuals who want to be vaccinated. As we speak, the vaccination committee, as well as members in my ministry, are exploring all of the avenues. We realize that at 40%, like many other parts of the world, we're now approaching the time when we're beginning to see some areas of vaccination hesitancy. These things are being explored, and it is our responsibility to move swiftly, along with our partners, inclusive of the United States, to assist us to ensure that we maximize the vaccines that we have in country.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marcus.
Yes, thank you very much, member for Tall Pines. I just want to note that the trend commenced in September, I believe that is correct. So up to the time of election, it appeared as if we were at a certain trajectory.
That is incorrect. The signs are now being manifested in the last 3 weeks.
Well, actually, just looking at the graph, I believe that your ministry may have released, it appeared that over the last 2 months, you've had a consistent trend in terms of going downwards from September.
Chair recognizes Tall Pines.
We all knew that in coming to office, there was some partial delays with the vaccines arriving into the country at the appropriate dates. I've made some utterances as it relates to why that happened. And subsequently, we have adequate vaccines in the country as we speak. We are now vaccinating individuals in our family islands by way of our clinics. We're exploring avenues and how to get the private healthcare facilities involved. And we are now exploring new avenues, and we understand that people who may not have access to software or the ability to book an appointment online have easy access where they can show up at these pop-up centers and just be vaccinated. And so with that being said, it is our responsibility now to push hard. And we need every Bahamian in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas who is able to listen to the sound of my voice, that the time has come to become vaccinated. We know that vaccination prevents massive hospitalizations and reduces the cause of death. And we are asking the opposition, all members of our community, to let us work together to ensure that we achieve our goal and prevent the possibility of death in the long time in our country.
It would be a wonderful thing, Madam President, Madam Speaker, if we were to take that position, the bipartisan approach to dealing with what is a deadly virus that our people are facing. I'm wondering if the member for Cat Island, Rumkeens in Salvador has insisted upon, or at least requested of all cabinet ministers and colleagues to become vaccinated. Because certainly, well, actually we're all paid, Madam Speaker, by the public purse. So we have very little business that's private, member for Exuma and Ragged Island. Because again, it's one thing to preach vaccination, and then it's another thing. It's another thing for us to manifest it in terms of how we behave. And so, being in cabinet, it was a bit comforting to know that everybody in the room was vaccinated. And so, I'm just wondering if the Minister of Health believes that that is a good idea, that parliamentarians, that cabinet ministers should all be vaccinated, given the close proximity we are with each other on a constant basis.
The chair recognizes.
Thank you so much. Madam President, the member for Madam Speaker, the member for Marco City knows very well what the government policy is. Vaccination in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is not mandatory. There is. Let me finish. No, let me finish. Give me a chance.
I didn't mention policy.
No, but I just said what the policy is. I didn't say you said it.
Okay.
I didn't say you said it. I'm stating the policy. Allow me to say the policy and then answer your question. That's all. Give me a chance, man. Give me a chance. Don't jump the gun. I know you're on the leadership race, and I think you're deserving. You're deserving, and we know each other quite well. But I want to make it very clear, and I want to make it clear to the Bahamian people, that this administration supported voluntary vaccinations for COVID-19. Voluntary. At no point in our administration, even in opposition, that we said that vaccination was mandatory. And because that is our position, if there is a member on our side who is unvaccinated, that is their choice. And we must be able to allow people to have their choices, even though, me personally, I support vaccination. And anyone that I meet, I usually indicate the reason why you should be vaccinated. But do not be confused. Vaccination in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas today is absolutely voluntary, but we encourage everyone in the Commonwealth to get vaccinated.
Sound and fury adding up to nothing. The question was, and let me repeat it in case you missed it. Your view and my view is the same. Everybody has a choice. I simply ask whether or not those of us that are in fact encouraging the public to get vaccinated are vaccinated. So this isn't an issue of choice. I support Bahamians' right to determine whether they wish to be vaccinated or not. But there is a burden of responsibility on those that are in charge that's setting the pace. So I was simply asking whether or not the cabinet of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas have encouraged its members to be vaccinated. That's all I asked. This was sorry?
I am speaking, I am fully vaccinated, and I assume that you are.
Yes, I am.
Well, that's fine. And so you're pushing the cause, and I am, and I'm also encouraging every Bahamian to the sound of my voice to get vaccinated. We have the vaccines in the country. Let us utilize them, and let us not be in a position where there's vaccination wastage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Pines. Madam Speaker, I would not get into the bills that are to come, but one of the things I found rather curious, and since we are discussing...
Madam Speaker, sorry. First of all, I would like to correct, 1 minute, member. I'd like to correct. We have not laid bills. We have laid rules. The rules are an amendment to the Health Services Act, Section 29.
Yes, sir.
They are rules and not bills. And so they're not debated in the House, but if you want to debate them, I will debate them with you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker, there are several things that are quite alarming about it. One of those, Madam Speaker, relates to the issue of our medical officers being able to collect blood, saliva from members of the public in the event that they suspect that the person may in fact be infected. And so maybe there's a logical explanation as to why such powers are given to a medical officer. And I'm curious as to what will they do with the samples that they collect from the ordinary citizen once they have collected it. And I would love to hear your view, given some of the human rights activists that you have now in cabinet, whether or not that's acceptable.
Member, if I am hearing you right, it seemed like you want to debate the bills with me, but who do we want to collect the samples from? And what are we going to do with the samples? I assure you that our medical officers don't want the samples for themselves. These samples are collected so that they can be analyzed to determine whether a person is COVID positive or COVID negative. And the results of those tests are subsequently downloaded into our database so we can know exactly what's going on in the country. And so in countries, not even in the Bahamas, they have so many demands on their manpower resources that they train ordinary individuals to do these things. I know they do it in Barbados. And so as the pandemic gets to a point where we need to bring other individuals, I believe that through the Ministry of Health, we will train citizens in our country who work with the health department to be able to help to collect these samples so we would be able to get a better control on the way we manage COVID-19 and to control our clusters as well as those in isolation. And so, yes, an individual need to collect the sample. It's very difficult for the person to collect the sample themselves. And so in the regulations, they're there. But this is the point I want to make. We have laid the regulations. These are very fluid, member for Marco City. They can change. And as they begin to change, the ministry and the advisory committee that is outlined in the regulations or in the rules have the capability to make the necessary adjustments. And that's exactly what we will do based on the circumstances that we confront and based on where we are in the country as it relates to our numbers of COVID-19.
The powers of the medical officer really appears to be quite similar to the powers of the competent authority. I mean, the Minister of Health becomes a very powerful member of the government, given the kinds of things that you have the ability to do. For example, close person's business down summarily, if just on suspicion. I'm just curious as to whether or not. Let me just finish the point. Just on suspicion of a violation, for example, of a protocol. I'm curious whether or not the protocols that are outlined in your rules the protocols that are outlined in your rules, you're asking businesses to establish protocols and then comply with them, or is the Ministry of Health going to provide protocols, a template for them?
Remember, you want to get the nuts and bolts of the rules. Listen to me very carefully. We have been speaking with the Chamber of Commerce, and we've been speaking with the business community. I want to make it clear. It's very difficult to manage a pandemic with rules. Let me explain to you why. We have had reports that we are too lenient. We have had reports that we are too tough. And the reality is, it is the ministry and the government responsibility to strike a workable balance that will be able to allow commerce to move, whereas we have an element of solid control of the pandemic, and to be able to do it in a very logical and systemic way to reduce the community spread in our country. I never indicated when we laid the rules that the rules were perfect. The rules are presently, and I laid them in time to get the input from the business community, from our churches, to get input from our sporting associations and their inputs. And to be honest with you, some of the inputs that we have received has definitely allowed me now to make some adjustment to the language in the rules so that it can become more palatable to the people who have to utilize the rules. And I assure you that today, before we lay the final copies of the rules, they will incorporate additional new feedback from the community. That's why they were laid in time to get the feedback necessary. But the rules will change based on the situation we are confronted.
Thank you very much. Well, that's encouraging, Member for Tall Pines. I know that the Progressive Liberal Party has prided itself on putting Bahamians first, and so I found it a bit odd, unless I misread it, that you were prepared to accept from the United States, and I'm pretty sure the member for Fox Hill would have a bit of a challenge with that, a 5-day-old test, a COVID test that you can actually take it 5 days. The American can take it 5 days before traveling, and we are willing to accept it. Whereas a Bahamian leaving the Bahamas, spending a significant amount of money, is tested before they leave, and if their turnaround is in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days, we seem to have a challenge with that. It seems as if it's an unequal treatment of Bahamians with Americans. And so if you could help me understand, why is there that disconnect?
I think, member, you should read the bills completely and the rules and come back, because what you're saying. No, let me finish. Let me finish. Give me an opportunity.
Members.
You're incorrect.
Okay, so help me understand.
You're incorrect.
Members.
Member, reel it and call me. Read it and call me.
Members. Honorable members.
No one is in jeopardy.
Honorable members.
No one's in jeopardy.
Honorable
No
members.
one's in jeopardy. Yeah. And I ain't traveling no road. No, so just, I'm hired to do a particular job, what I would do.
Some other people, so I'm just
Listen to me very carefully.
Honorable member for Marco City.
Yeah.
I remind you that one speaker, one person on the feed at the time, please.
Yes, except if the one speaker is insulting me, Madam Speaker, I intend to stand up. So don't tell me read the bill. The fact is that I'm referencing a section because I've read the section. So if only that section I'm raising with you. So just make the point.
No, the
Point, don't get cute.
No, I don't want to be cute.
Okay.
But I don't want you to be disrespectful as well. So we have, you are. Sir, please be respectful, because I respect you. So give me an opportunity to explain. We have laid 2 sets of rules, and this is for the Bahamian people. The Health Services COVID-19 Prevention and Management of Community Spread rules, and we have also laid the Health Services COVID-19 General Rules. These rules are rules from the Health Services Act by way of Section 19 chapters 231. It gives the minister, in the event of a pandemic, to put rules together to control the pandemic. The member spoke specifically about travel. And in the travel supplementary rules, and I didn't want to go in this, but you know, he called me the competent authority. I am not. Read part 2, management of COVID-19 pandemic, the functions and powers of the minister. And then look at the advisory committee. The advisory committee revolves around people with expertise in epidemiology, supply management and logistics, health service administration at the primary and tertiary levels, public health, management of infectious disease, laboratory management, and pharmaceutical management, and the list goes on and on. So I don't want the Bahamian people to believe that we dismantle the competent authority from the office of the Prime Minister, and now the competent authority rests in Minister Darville. No. The competent authority rests in an advisory committee, but the minister is actually the point with the powers necessary in order to ensure that he defend the rules and he ensure that whatever the advisory committee gives as a result of where we're going, that these things are implemented by way of the minister. Now, he spoke specifically to, and I'm trying to put my hand on it because I will discuss it. He spoke about travel and the requirement for travel, and we're speaking about... No, we're speaking about travel, yeah, and we speak a fully vaccinated against travel, undergo COVID administration, accredit 5 days, submit the course. Sir, let me, what it is I will sit down and allow you to finish, and when I make my contribution, I will speak to it specifically. You finish what you have to do, because I'm the speaker after you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are just several other matters if the member for Tall Pines could make a note of, just to clarify. And let me just say, Madam Speaker and colleagues, that really I'm raising the questions for the benefit of the community. I mean, this is, I want you to do well, because when you do well, our people are taken care of. So let me just say that. So again, in the same section you just referenced, section 5, point number 2 says, in carrying out his functions, and that is the powers of the minister, in paragraph 1, the minister may by order impose such restrictions and implement such containment and mitigation measures as he deems necessary. You know, some fairly wide powers, member for West and Bimini, that the Minister of Health has. And so again, it's so important that when we characterize certain positions and then we come up with an alternative, that we be mindful that depending on how your duties are executed, that you could run the risk of functioning in the same way of that thing that you criticize. So I just wanted to raise that. Okay, and so one of the other issues is you've gone to great lengths to talk in the rules about wearing masks. It is my hope that we have some common sense responses to wearing the mask, which I support, and I wear it constantly, right? However, if somebody is out walking, because at one point in the rules you talk about when you are outside of your premises, right? I mean, does it really make sense if I'm exercising and walking? I'm just walking. I'm not jogging. I'm walking down the road. I'm by myself, or I'm out in the wilderness in a prayer session. You know, when I was young, Mom used to basically take us, and we would go and pray in a location. In fact, that's the only thing that helped me here today. But does it make sense for you are out by yourself walking that you need to have a facial mask? So I'm hoping we'd have some common sense responses. I look at the penalties that you've outlined in the bill, which I also found curious. You've just done something that I think benefited a number of Bahamians. You've erased, I think broadly, the penalties that were enforced on them as a result, I believe it was of violating curfew. That's correct? So in so doing, I look at some of the other penalties that exist in the bill, and I'm just curious that when there is a violation, can these result in criminal records as well? So I think that would be something I'd just be very much interested in hearing about. You also have in the rules, and you may wish to look at it, the issue of distance between persons. Social distancing is the section that you refer to. I believe in schools, you have a social distance of roughly around 3 feet. And then everyone else in other premises, it's 6 feet. If you could just reconcile them, I'm sure there must be a reasonable rationale for why you are making that distinction, 3 feet versus 6 feet. What is it in the school environment that makes that different? If you wish to, I'd yield. I'd be happy to yield. Yeah? Okay, good. So again, it would be also good when you are on your feet to address the issue where the medical officer, if someone, for example, had contracted COVID, they were off from work, and they have tested, it's time for them to go back to work, if I read the rules correctly, they must now wait on a letter from the medical officer. If that is correct, that would be rather troublesome, given the nature of our bureaucracy. I mean, somebody might very well be home waiting for a minute to get a letter in order to return to work. So I just wanted a clarification on that particular point. The medical officer has a significant amount of power. Help me understand that the competent authority, one of the biggest criticisms I heard was that this is a tremendous amount of power, and I believe that the member for Freetown, my good cousin from Ragged Island, who didn't defend me when he was in that place, but so my good cousin made the point that there was a limited time that the powers of the competent authority should be in effect. Given the amount of power that the minister now holds, and I think we would want the public to clearly understand in these rules how far-reaching the powers are, because it appears, certainly on a cursory read of it, that these powers are very similar to what we just moved away from. And like I said, I support the Parliament overseeing it. The difference, though, the competent authority, if you're not extending the emergency powers, should come to an end, according to the member from Freetown, in the shortest possible time. It was only designed for a short period of time, if I heard you correctly. This, however, is ongoing, indefinite, unless, for example, you make a determination that you're going to change elements of these rules. And so I think it is important that we go through the rules for the general public. I think if nothing else comes out of this discussion, it is my hope that the government would take the time, step by step, to lay this out for the public. I know you've put it here for consultation, but I think we ought to have a public discussion on the rules that you have laid, because I think that there are some elements of this that's quite concerning, and there may be a simple, logical explanation for why that is the case. Madam Speaker, before I take my seat, I just wanted to go back to a point raised by the member for Exuma and Ragged Island. Madam Speaker, the reason I'm going back to this is because last sitting, I asked that it be expunged, I believe, from the record, the claim that the Free National Movement government laid off 2,500 persons when it came to office. None of us on this side was aware of that. Yes.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
During my presentation last week, I undertook to lay a document by the Tribune. The subject is termination of 2,500 from civil service a breach of union agreement. It's dated January 30th, 2018, and the author is Morgan Adley. I now undertake to lay it, Madam Speaker. I now lay it.
Recorded that the document be brought up.
Okay.
Order that the document lie on the table.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the document that has been laid by the member for Exuma and Ragged Island does not support the point that he made. So what he did. So I want to lay it out. So an accusation was made. Yes.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Granberham and Bimini.
For the purpose of this debate, I do not believe that the member is being relevant. That matter in which you wish to discuss or raise now can be raised later. But this debate is about the COVID-19 special provisions, and we wish to deal with that issue at the present time. So, Madam Speaker, I'm asking the chair to ensure that we remain relevant.
Yes. Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, again, I've been in this place a very short time. I fully accept that. 4.5 years. I wanted my whole 5, but that aside, I've been in here a very short period of time. But Madam Speaker, if there is any organization in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that has the ability to take a conjunction and connect something in Timbuktu with something in Canada, it is the Progressive Liberal Party. We have opened with the leader opposite from Kid Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador by merely reading the short title of a bill, and then they talk about something entirely different. So, my brother, as long as we are in here, it is very relevant to the discussion. So I would ask that we don't go down that road in terms of relevance. Yes, the conjunction is very straightforward. That we should not be characterizing groups falsely. That's what the conjunction is. And so I just want to say, Madam Speaker, I want to read in response to what has been mentioned. And by the way, the article clearly shows that the member of the union that was cited by the president of the union that was cited by the Minister of Tourism, the member for Exuma, clearly said that he did not read the report. So he was responding to a question asked by a journalist. So he was not stating fact. That's clear in the article. But here's another article by Rashad Roll, Tribune senior reporter. The Minister administration, which came to power promising to right-size the civil service after the Christie administration hired scores of people, has made at least 2,402 people permanent members of the civil service and has promoted more than 1,600 people throughout the government since taking office. I can go on. I just want to make this point so I don't belabor this. And I'd like for you to work with. I'd like for you to work with me. The date of this article is June 11, 2021. Okay? So, Madam Speaker, I've spoken with the Minister with responsibility for the public service. I've spoken with the Attorney General, former Attorney General. I've spoken with my colleagues. Now, unless I missed class those couple of days, no one has a recollection of 2,500 persons being laid off at any point. So what I would ask, Madam Speaker, we have with us the Minister and the Minister of State for the Public Service. This is easy enough to be resolved. For example, to return to the office at some point to gather that information to lay it on the table of the House. But on the basis of that article, it is unfair and wrong to make a claim where nothing has been presented except an article that states an opinion. And so, Madam Speaker, I'm asking that the assertion made by the member for Exuma be withdrawn. I can read into the record the entire article that lays out that the persons who we met in power, let's pick the 1,600 persons from the Ministry of Education. They were working, but did not have the relevant documents to be in that ministry. All of those persons were confirmed. No, all of those persons were confirmed. There were persons in Inland Revenue on 3 months and 6 months contract. Again, those persons were confirmed. There were some persons in Ministry of Transport. Again, so we have no different. You've hired them. They were hired by the PLP in the waning days of the last election. But those persons were confirmed. In fact, you still have members in several of those ministries whose documentation still haven't been sent from that ministry to public service to make sure that they're confirmed properly. So what I'm saying is it's not accurate. If it is accurate, again, I would repudiate that kind of action in this place. But it is not accurate.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Madam Speaker, the member for Marco City represented that this member made an assertion to this parliament that was not accurate. I take an affront to that, Madam Speaker, first of all. Secondly, let me say that the article I quoted, as I said before, was 2018. 2018. Yeah. The article the member is quoting is dating 2021. I'm not interested in performing a reconciliation of what may have happened between that 3-year period. I made the point that the former Attorney General said that the government was saving $75 million by laying off 2,500 people. That's the first thing, right? Was it a ridiculous assertion? I leave it for the member to determine. Secondly, Madam Speaker, the labor force survey bared out, and I believe this may have been November 2017. I invite the member in this reconciliation to access it. It demonstrated that the government laid off in excess of 2,500, Madam Speaker. In fact, the labor force survey at that point or some point thereafter indicated, Madam Speaker, that because of this, there was an adjustment in the rate of unemployment. I remember it distinctly. So I'm happy to assist the member with his reconciliation in due course for that 3-year term. But I invite him to firstly access the record of what was said by his Attorney General, 1. And 2, to access the information as laid out in the official report by the Department of Statistics. Let me just make one final point, Marco City. It is conceivable that what existed in 2018 may have been reversed before the end of your 4.5-year term. It is conceivable that your administration laid off persons who they may have believed to have been hired by the former administration, who they may have believed to have not been their supporters, and then rehired many more before they left office. That is conceivable. But
Honourable member.
So I still have the floor. I still have the floor.
Honourable members.
I have the floor, Madam. I have the floor, Madam Speaker.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do, honourable member.
I have the floor.
Yes, you do.
Madam
The
Speaker,
chair.
I make the point that what the information I provided is correct. I'm not prepared to withdraw. I lay on the table reference to the comments made by the Attorney General at the time, Carl Bethel, and I invite the member to access the labor force service.
So, Madam Speaker, the reality is, if it's the labor, the labor survey done by the Department of Statistics, if that is going to be the reference, it is that you should lay on the table. But I'm saying you can lay what you wish. But I'm saying, Madam Speaker, you may lay what you wish, but what you lay does not support what you say.
Honorable members.
But it does not support what you said. But it does not, the article you laid does not support.
Thank you, thank you, honorable member. I haven't acknowledged anybody as yet. Honorable members. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Madam Speaker, the document that is being laid ought to be a document that supports the assertion that's made. That's the only point I'm making. And I'm saying that, again, I've spoken to the Attorney General, and he does not share that view, nor does the Minister of Labor. And so I would ask, Madam Speaker, until we can get the labor survey, that those remarks that we laid off 2,500 persons for a saving of $75 million, that be struck from the record because it is inaccurate.
Speaker. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Speaker, I laid the document.
Okay.
It's an article from the Tribune. I adopted that in my presentation last week. I'm not prepared to withdraw anything, Madam Speaker. I stand by my comments. I have nothing else to add on this, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to lay on the table the comments of the then Minister of Public Service, who refutes what has been said. And the final point I'd make, Madam Speaker, because I know I'm out of time, Madam Speaker, is it is easier for the Minister or the Minister of State for Public Service to simply look at the record. If you laid off 2,500 persons, let me finish the point. If you just give me a point. If you laid off those persons, their name, one second, their names should have appeared in 2017 at the time of the election. Madam Speaker,
Yeah, the member for Marco was given latitude.
You're asking me to lay a
He was
document,
given
are you?
extreme latitude. First of all, he was not relevant to the debate today. He's been extensive in his comments of the debate of last week. The member for Exuma has laid on the table what he asked for. That has been done. Now, Madam Speaker, we will proceed to the debate.
Yes,
Before
we
us
will
today.
proceed.
Madam Speaker,
Order that the document be brought up.
the names that appeared in 2017, they're still working in the public service. That's why I take issue.
Honorable member, please take your seat, honorable member.
They're still working.
Oh, Lord.
They're still working. They're still working.
Order that the document do lie on the table.
They're still working.
Take them off. One at a time.
As meaning, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
Thank you so much. Madam President, Madam Speaker, I don't know, I still think I'm in the other place. I need a wake-up call. Yeah. Madam Speaker, yes, Madam Speaker, the member from Marco City, I think he asked probably about 14 questions as it relates to the rules. I know him quite well. I'm asking him to put those questions on a piece of paper so that I can give him the answers to those questions. And when we give the answer to the questions, me and you will continue the issues as it relates to this. But I want to let you know that we did not lay the rules and did not seek public consultation. The PLP don't do that. What we do is we try to make things workable and palatable, where the community will be able to interface in the rules and use them wisely. And this member is prepared to listen and listen carefully. Present those requests to our advisory committee. Our advisory committee, along with technical officers, will determine whether or not we're in a position to be flexible or we're in a position to maintain our ground. I've made it clear that the rules are not perfect. They're not perfect, and it's very difficult to put rules together that will control the pandemic. I'm sure the competent authority had the same challenges. We having the same challenges where we sit, But we have taken the legislative route simply because the proclamation for emergency orders took away unnecessary civil liberties that we felt that were inappropriate after 18 months. And we've made a decision that we will go this route. And we will go this route because we believe that the Bahamian people put us on this side because they understood the direction we wanted to take the country. And we are going to live up to what is in our blueprint for change. But I do say that I hear you loud and clear. And as a member of our community, you have a right to challenge the rules. Put them on paper and let me and you see if we can find common ground. And if we can, I will be the first one to make recommendations to make them even more palatable. Right. I think that's a fair position for me to stand today, because we cannot go back and forth debating the rules in this place. Because if it was a bill, it would be different. But I do understand your position, because some of the concerns that you have brought to the forefront, the chamber has also brought it to the forefront. The business community has also allowed us to see what they are. And as we speak, the technical team from my administration or my office is gathering that information and subsequently will change a bit of the language and modify some aspects of the rules that is more palatable to the various organizations in our country, but not everything that they have suggested, because we must draw a line in the sand, because our responsibility is healthcare and to protect our Bahamian as well as our visitors, and to do it to the best of our ability. Madam President, we do have common ground with the member from, Madam Speaker, we do have common ground with the member for Marco City as it relates to justice for Bella. And I could assure you that we have had multiple discussions on this matter to this point, and we are eager to work very close with the opposition to be able to put this matter in a better setting and to do what is right for our country. So when we begin to discuss it, we're looking for your complete support, because it's for the well-being of our children and to prevent something like this happening again in our society in the future. Madam Speaker, this morning it gives me great pleasure on behalf of the great people of Tall Pines to support the bill before us today. The mover and the seconder made it very clear what we're trying to do with the bill. I believe is non-contentious, and so I support it 100%. I would also like to thank, because I didn't get the opportunity to do this, and my mother always told me, Mike, be thankful. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the former Member of Parliament, the Honorable Leslie Miller, for his ongoing support. You know what's so amazing? He's there with me now. As a matter of fact, as I speak, he's in the community assisting me with some matters as it relates to Tall Pines. And that's what team and working together is all about. Madam President, I've also come to realize that no man is an island. And political support comes from many directions, even from directions that you least support or suspect. I also wish to thank my team for their ongoing support, and most of all, the people of Tall Pines, who are certainly the wind beneath my wings. Madam Speaker, what an amazing job our Prime Minister did in his recent trip abroad on climate change. My God. Like many people throughout our country, we on this side are very proud of our Prime Minister. And I am so pleased that he's put us back on the map. And we are now shining on the international stage. Thank you, Prime Minister. Last week, I laid two pieces of legislation and their rules, the Health Services COVID-19 Prevention and Management of Community Spread Rules 2021 and the Health Services COVID-19 Rules 2021. Since then, we have received feedback from the Chamber of Commerce, other sectors of the business community, the Christian Council, Sporting Association, and civil society. The discussions ran deep. Member for Marco City, just like how our discussion ran deep. And once again, verified to me and our technical team how difficult it is to regulate a pandemic. It's not an easy thing to do. Some people believe the rules are too lenient and they row us. And some people believe that we still have too much control. How do you strike that balance? And how do you keep the country moving economically in the midst of a pandemic? It's a difficult task, member for Marco City. But with God's help and listening, we believe that we will be able to get the job done. But Madam Speaker, we have listened, and my team at the Ministry of Health and Wellness will incorporate into our rules some of the recommendations received from the wider public. We have also made a few amendments to bring to a greater degree of clarity. There's some things that when you work in with the drafts persons from the Legal Reform Commission, we believe that the word is connected, and then when the general public read it, it's not as clear, but it's captured somewhere in the language even further on outside of the Section 29 of the Health Services Act. It's there somewhere. I am not a legal expert, but we have been asking them to make sure the language is captured. The Health Services Act is a bill that's been around for a long time. It needs to be amended. But because of the time constraints, we have decided to use these amendments in our benefit while we work diligently to put a strong piece of legislation that will help us in the future in the event that we confront a similar thing like a pandemic of this magnitude. We have also made these amendments, and with this greater degree of clarity of the language of the existing rules, we believe by the time as we gazette it, it will be more user-friendly. But it is a work in progress, just like the pandemic continuously change. I wish to thank the business community, our churches, our sporting associations for their critical, constructive criticism and support during this difficult time in our country, and to say to Bahamians all over this country, these rules will help us to prevent community spread. They will help us to protect our families and our loved ones, and ultimately reduce the incidence of individuals coming to hospital for tertiary care. Madam Speaker, yesterday after Cabinet, I had the opportunity to take a short walk on Bay Street. And I can safely say that there are positive signs of growth in our tourism sector. Thank you, Minister of Tourism and Aviation. You're doing an excellent job. And as Minister of Health, I will do all in my power to the extent that I could go to ensure that this growth continues. The majority of our stores are open. Hallelujah.
Did the ODCO help at all?
Well, between me and you,
Honourable member.
You want to shift my speech. Well, between me and you, I'm speaking about our minister. You had an opportunity to speak about your minister and didn't do it. Next time you stand to your feet, do it. Okay, this is your chance now.
Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member from Marco City.
Speaker, I share the enthusiasm of the member from Tall Pines. I just think, Madam Speaker, it sends the wrong message to the public that in 7 weeks, what you see on Bay Street, can I finish the point? That what you see on Bay Street is a reflection of efforts solely made in the last 7 weeks. I accept that the member for Exuma has done a tremendous job, but it's fair to say that much of that heavy lifting also took place before the general election.
Honourable member.
That's a point of clarification. I allow you to make your point, and I leave it like that.
Well, that is not a point of order. I hear your concerns.
I allow you to make it like that, and that's good enough for me. One of our major concerns, though, is still the straw market. And the Minister of Works and our team, we're working diligently to finalize the healthcare protocols that would ensure that our vendors, our craftspersons and shoppers function in a clean, safe environment, understanding very well that we are in a deadly pandemic and safety and the mitigation of COVID-19 community spread is critical for us to open it and to keep it open. Madam Speaker, today, we also lay the additional bill called the COVID-19 Pandemic Specific Provision Bill 2021. The bill before us this morning focuses on the transition from where we are to where we are going. I support the bill and will allow these modifications of the Local Government Act, the Education Act, the Immigration Act, the Data Protection Act, and they will fall away in a matter of days. Madam Speaker, before I take my seat, I cannot overemphasize the scientific fact that vaccination is one of the greatest tools to prevent serious illness and hospitalization against COVID-19. We have adequate supplies, and I've said it before, of vaccine in country, and we are once again pleading to those who have not come forward to do so as soon as possible to our pop-up sites in New Providence and at our clinics in the Family Islands. Finally, we are in this fight together, Madam Speaker. So let us follow the science, let us practice the proper health protocols, and always remember, as a community, together we stand, divided we fall. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Tall Pines support the bill.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Asmini? The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central Grand Bahama.
Madam Speaker, while I love the community of Central Grand Bahama,
I think you're East Grand Bahama. Yes. You had the wrong there.
I would nowhere dare take my friend's seat. But also,
my apologies, East Grand Bahama.
But also, I want to ensure that the good people of East Grand Bahama also have a representative as well. Madam Speaker, I want to first of all give God thanks for the ability to stand in this place one more opportunity. And I also wish to thank the good people, the wonderful people of East Grand Bahama who have provided me with an opportunity to speak. I also, Madam Speaker, want to commend the member from Marco City in his presentation this morning, Madam Speaker. He's done an excellent job, I believe, in representing the views of the opposition. So I want to commend him. Madam Speaker, just to add to some of the things that the member from Marco City spoke about, and so that there is no misinterpretation as to what is being proceeded with this morning. We agree that the emergency orders ought to come to an end. I don't believe that that is a position that is in dispute, and so I don't want it to be in the public domain that this side is in any way opposed to the emergency orders coming to an end. We believe, Madam Speaker, that the COVID situation and the COVID pandemic is still a live issue in the Bahamas, and is still a live issue throughout the world. And we must be able to adjust and we must be able to transition from living in a country where there is emergency orders to living in a country where the law properly, through Parliament, is able to manage the pandemic. And so, Madam Speaker, we on this side agree with that wholeheartedly. We also, Madam Speaker, wish to set the record straight with respect to a couple of matters. You know, I hear other members and other talk that is out there that they have now provided the answer that the Free National Movement government did not provide. Well, again, Madam Speaker, we want to set the record straight. Before the election, the then government tabled the Public Health Emergency Preparedness and Management Bill of 2021. In fact, at the time when the then Prime Minister, the member for Kalani, said that he was seeking one last, and that point was specifically made, that they were seeking one last extension of the emergency order, and at the same time, we were tabling the bill, which would then move us forward away from having the emergency orders. So there is nothing, the same direction that this government is taking is the same direction the previous government was taking. They've decided to move it in a different way, in that they've decided to lay the rules as opposed to presenting a bill. Though that bill, which was tabled, it was intended on that bill being sent out for consultation, which it was. We believe that, and hopefully the now government would have taken a look at that bill, looked at the some of the comments that came back, and in addition to that, be able to come up with the best proposals moving forward. We are happy that you've been able to receive the comments of all of the Chamber of Commerce and the church business communities, and hope that you will also take those comments into account. There is one point, though, on the bill that we would ask you to we'd also ask you to take a look at. In particular, it is the Advisory Council and the makeup of the Advisory Council. Your rules limit, in some respects, the Advisory Council to medical professionals. But it also says, I believe, in one of the last sections, that the minister can add professionals to the Advisory Council. If you take a look at the bill that the Free National Movement put forward, we were very specific in terms of who should be added to the Advisory Council. The Advisory Council under our bill had members, members from the medical professional, but it also had a retired Supreme Court justice who would have been there to be able to advise on all of the legal matters that would have arisen, because I'm sure you would be aware that in making these kinds of rules and regulations, the lawyers sometimes are just as important as the medical professionals, because the medical professionals now have to give you the medical side of it, but the lawyers also now have to be able to put it in legal form and in regulation and put it to where it can be enforceable. And so we'd ask you to look at that as well, because we believe having a retired Supreme Court justice, I think, just makes sense to have a senior attorney on that Advisory Council to be able to present their views. Our Advisory Council also had on it persons from the Ministry of Finance. And that is key, because one of the things that when we look at the entire section and the entire situation about putting in place protocols that restrict businesses, putting in place protocols that restrict how people enter into the country, one of the views that must be at the table is those persons from the Ministry of Finance who manage our economy and who can speak to the government's revenue and the government's expenses. And so we thought that it was better to have somebody from the Ministry of Finance on that advisory council so that when the minister makes his determinations with respect to what should happen, what protocols should be put in place, what businesses should be shut down, who should enter into the country, that you have somebody from finance who can speak to those relevant issues. Because as you know, those restrictions have economic impacts. And so we must ensure that we have the proper persons from the Ministry of Finance. Another person that was on our committee, our advisory committee, that we would recommend that you take a look at as well, we put it in the law that someone nominated by the opposition was also going to sit on that advisory committee. It was always said from members of the government when they were in opposition that they wanted to be at the table to be able to speak to these issues and share their views and speak on behalf of the Bahamian public and be able to speak on behalf of the opposition. Our bill specifically said that on that advisory committee, the leader of the opposition would be able to appoint a representative of the opposition to sit on that advisory committee. Now that you are the government, we would hope that you would do the same as what you would have recommended while you were in opposition, which is to provide the opposition also with a seat at the table when it comes to making those decisions. We think that it is a fair position to put forward, that the opposition, when it comes to that advisory committee, is able to.
Thank you so much.
The chair recognizes the honourable member.
Thank you so much, member for Palmer, to sit and give me an opportunity to respond. You have said something that is very important to us, and we would definitely take into consideration your recommendations. I feel that they're sound. We know how difficult it is to manage the pandemic, and I've said it before in good faith, that we need the opposition and we need the government to actively be involved and to stop politicizing COVID. COVID is a dangerous thing to politicize. When I was the shadow minister of health, I stayed clear of COVID. It was very tempting for me to go after COVID and to attack members on the other side. But you will never find any utterance from this minister as it relates to politicizing COVID. COVID is something that has affected us all. Everyone, the chairman can speak for himself. I'm speaking for me. Because I always govern myself with the hope that one day I may be sitting in the seat, and thanks to our prime minister, the opportunity has fallen to me. And so I would act responsible, and member, you could rest assured that these things would be taken into consideration, because we need all hands on deck so that we can put this behind us, or at least be able to manage it while we get on with what the Bahamian people want us to get on with, and that is to get the economy going. Thank you.
I want to thank you for your intervention. You'd indicated that when we were in that other place, and I only wish that you could see the the look on the face of the member for Vauxhall when you said that. he and I may recall things the same. Oh, absolutely. But I take you at your word in terms of being able to allow those recommendations to be considered and to be put forward. So we do take you at your word. But Madam Speaker, I also wish to just speak again a little bit about the bill itself, because the bill itself is a simple bill. I mean, again, it's nothing that would be at all controversial. And in fact, what is happening is there are certain provisions of the emergency orders that you are in essence asking to be extended. So there are certain provisions that were in the Local Government Act, in the Education Act, in Immigration Act, in the Data Protection Act, that were in the emergency orders. So the emergency orders in essence suspended certain provisions in this act. And so what is being done here now is we are asking for those provisions to be extended for a further 90 days. Again, we have no difficulties with that because it is a transition period that would be required to ensure that there is no abrupt stop and that the country moves smoothly. So again, there would be nothing that we would have in terms of disputing what is being done here. But again, we must make the point, because there were, again, some inferences put forward first. We must make the point that this is not a change in what the previous government was doing. We had said this was going to be the last emergency order. We had tabled the transition. We had tabled the act that was going to speak to that. And a lot of the provisions, not all, but a lot of the provisions that are actually in the act that we table are in the rules that you table. So governments are continuous. You have taken what we have left in place, and you are indeed moving forward with respect to what we have left in place. You have modified it, as is the government's right and obligation to do, but in essence, the principle is the same in that we are coming to an end. There are two issues, Madam Speaker, that I just wish to raise with respect to the COVID protocols and the COVID situation. The first is a situation that I've been advised by some constituents, and I've raised it in the public domain about a week or two ago, with respect to the Grand Bahama shipyard. Madam Speaker, you might be aware that the Grand Bahama shipyard has a situation where there are basically two types of persons that work in the Grand Bahama shipyard. There are full-time employees who are employed by the Grand Bahama shipyard, and then there are subcontractors who are employed by another company, but they do work in the Grand Bahama shipyard. And in fact, they may do work for the Grand Bahama shipyard. It's just that they are technically employed by another company, and the company then contracts with that employment company to allow those employees to come and do work inside the shipyard. And there are probably about 100 or so workers that have this type situation, and it fluctuates, because it fluctuates based upon what business the shipyard has at that time. So they are not full-time. I'm advised that the full-time employees have a form of a vaccine mandate. And what I mean by that is you must either be fully vaccinated to work as a full-time employee or present a COVID test. I believe it's once a week. You must present a COVID test in order for you to work at the Grand Bahama shipyard, to be an employee. That, I believe, is consistent with a number of the other large businesses that are here. I know in the United States, Many companies are even having a problem with that type mandate, where one, you must disclose what your vaccine situation is, and people are having challenges with that. And you must either be vaccinated or present with a COVID test. Unfortunately, those who are the subcontractors, there is a mandate for the subcontractors to be fully vaccinated, period. So they are not allowed the option of presenting a negative COVID test. That is probably the most restrictive mandate that I most certainly have heard of persons working. And what it has done, unfortunately, and the very same way that I believe the member for Tall Pines really in an eloquent way put forward the position of the government, which I believe we support, which is we are encouraging persons to be fully vaccinated. However, it is their personal choice. But the challenge with that policy with subcontractors is that you are preventing a person from accessing a workplace and being employed, and you are not giving them the option of having a negative COVID test. So you are, in essence, terminating them because they cannot work. And they are now being challenged with respect to those persons who have taken a personal decision with respect to taking the vaccine, even when it comes to applying for unemployment assistance. They are having a challenge with respect to their employer, because their employer is saying, well, we didn't fire you. It was the shipyard who said you can't come to work. So we are not going to pay you for your severance pay. So you have about 50 or so of these employees who have a very serious challenge with respect to this. And the challenge is for those people who want to get vaccinated, it still will take a period of time before they can be fully vaccinated. And so even in those circumstances, those employees have a very serious challenge. And we are also being advised, and this has always been a problem at the Grand Bahama Shipyard. We are also being advised that those employees who are not being allowed to come to work, they have been replaced by the foreign workers, which is a very serious problem. Because as a Bahamian, you should not be disenfranchised from your employment if you have made the decision that you are not going to take the vaccine, or in certain circumstances, you will not be fully vaccinated for a period of time. So, Madam Speaker, I have requested that either the Minister of Labor or the Minister for Grand Bahama or the Minister of Health, if they could inquire into this situation. I know that there are a number of East Grand Bahama, and I'm sure that there are a number of other constituents in Grand Bahama who this situation affects. And again, we want to make it clear. We encourage, I don't know if you want to make an intervention?
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much for yielding.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Tall Pines.
Thank you for yielding, sir. These are allegations that we would move very swiftly to substantiate. And between me and the Minister for Grand Bahama and Immigration, we'll look into the matter immediately because the rules and the law is clear. This is not the first time we have heard of companies want to get ahead of the rules, but it is important for those out there to understand that vaccination in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is voluntary. We support vaccination, We prepared to send our teams into those large institutions or companies to encourage vaccination, but we definitely need to explore this in full detail because we have been hearing things as well. And some of what you have said, some people have said is not the case, but we will look deep into it with an attempt to resolve it immediately, particularly when you articulate that some Bahamians have been displaced because of not wanting to be vaccinated. We have to look into it, and I assure you we'll do it ASAP.
Thank you very much for Tall Pines. And as I said, I want to make the distinction. I'm not saying that full-time employees, because I don't want to be sort of misquoted. I'm not saying full-time employees, because as I am advised, the full-time employees have the option.
That's what I was told.
They have to be fully vaccinated or they can present a COVID test. But I'm not speaking of the full-time employees. Remember now, and you would be fully aware of this because you did the excellent program with allowing the subcontractors to be able to come in there. We are speaking mainly about the subcontractors, and that's what we want you to take a look at. It's the subcontractors, and as I said, the subcontractors are having a real challenge with. They are now in terms of trying to seek unemployment assistance. They are now not even being able to get the unemployment assistance or their severance pay, because I don't want to call the employer's name, but that employer is saying, you didn't fire me. I didn't fire you. It is the shipyard that is not allowing you to come to work. That's where the legal, I think the legal issue is coming in. So you can take a look at that as well. I've also raised an issue, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Pine Ridge as well as the Minister for Transport, who had indicated that they would look into this. They would look into this matter and seek to also have it addressed. But there are a number of taxi drivers who are in. I don't know if the situation is the same with respect to the Providence, but a number of taxi drivers in Grand Bahama who have indicated that during the emergency orders, they were advised by the previous government that while the orders did not specifically say so, they were, it was not mandatory for them to register their public service vehicles while the emergency orders were in effect. And that once the emergency orders came to an end, they would have been provided with, I believe it was 3 months, or they would have been provided with some additional time in order to allow them to register their vehicles. Some of them have not paid for, a year or more since the pandemic started. And they were advised that they have to now pay for their registration, and they were given a very, very short notice period in terms of the payment. I raised this with the Minister for Grand Bahama, and I've also raised it with the Minister of Transport, and they both have indicated that they will inquire into the matter and seek to assist. And so I will leave that matter with them. As I close, Madam Speaker, I want to also echo the words of the member for Marco City, and also the words of yourself, Madam Speaker, and I believe members on the other side who have raised the tragedy with little Bella. And Madam Speaker, it brought to mind the tragedy in Grand Bahama with that whole situation with the missing boys, the 4 missing boys, and what that did for Grand Bahama, and the tragedy that it really meant for not just Grand Bahama, but I believe for the entire Bahamas. It also brought to mind, Madam Speaker, another situation that occurred some years ago with a teacher who was not just accused, but I believe was convicted of in 8 Mile Rock, in the school in 8 Mile Rock. And I recall I believe it was at this time, and I believe it was the member for Angliston who really raised this issue. And at that time, there was a select committee that was put in place to look at that situation. Because the questions were raised as to how is it possible that, and I believe what had occurred was there was many years, or maybe 10 years or so, that this wasn't reported, and so there were issues about the time limit and so on. And the question was, how is it possible that this could happen in a school, in a public school, for so many years, and no one reported or it not be brought to the police's attention, and that no recourse and justice was done for such a long period of time? Della raises a lot of questions. And it raises, and I'm only speaking in terms of the reports that were out in the public domain, in terms of what the public has said, but it raises a number of questions and concerns. And this might be one of those situations where we as parliamentarians may want to look at this as a select committee in order for us to, and select committee has a number of benefits in that it allows parliamentarians to call witnesses, and it allows parliamentarians really to get into the nuts and bolts of a situation, and to specifically understand what the situation is that occurred, and then to be able to present recommendations to the government as to how we move forward to ensure that this does not happen again. And so this might be one of those situations, given the gravity of the situation, given the way that the public really has, the public outcry over this and a public devastation over this. This might be one of those situations, Madam Speaker, where a select committee is requested so that we as parliamentarians can do what we really were elected to do, which is to look at these kinds of situations and make a meaningful change with respect to these kinds of situations, and in a bipartisan way. Because I was on that select committee, because what was done at the time, and we agreed, we had an agreed bipartisan recommendations that was put forward to the government. In fact, there were recommendations about school protocols that was put forward. And I believe some of those school protocols were actually adopted. And so there is value with respect to select committees, and value when it comes to having a bipartisan approach when it comes to these things. So I believe we will, as a caucus, look at it and also raise the question with the government. I believe, again, this is one of those, and it doesn't happen often, where it is something that rises above politics, and everyone should be outraged, and everyone should jump to an opportunity to make a positive impact and make a positive change. That's what we're here for. Yes, sir. That is what I believe the people elected us to do. And not, and we hear it all the time about the seriousness of this place. And, people sometimes take offense when you have a jovial moment and you are laughing and so on, and people take offense to that, and understandably so, because they said they send you here to do serious business. Tragedy sometimes presents us with opportunities to make positive change. And so I don't believe we could just sit back and just be outraged. But that outrage must move us to do something. And this is something that I believe we ought to move forward with. Madam Speaker, I think with those words, we, as I said, on this side, do support the bill before us.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, many persons have said to me that I'm not a good politician, and perhaps because I don't do the joined up thing that everyone speaks about. My training causes me to be analytical and to concentrate in that regard. Although this isn't the subject of this debate, I would be remiss, Madam Speaker, if I did not address the tragedy that is Little Bella. In my role as Minister of National Security, I have the fortune or misfortune of being advised of many bad things that happen in this country on a daily, on a weekly basis. I've come to the conclusion, Madam Speaker, in line with Marco City, that as a country, sometimes we get excited to outrage. We become outraged. As East Grand Bahama says, we meet, we decide to do something, and then all of that outrage and activity collides with inertia. And one only needs to consider that Marco's alert is not active, although there was great outrage about that circumstance. One only need consider that the Sexual Offenders Registry that was brought into force by appointed notice by the then Attorney General on the 27th day of July, 2019, over 2 years ago, still is not active, even though we as a country have paid for the technology to make it active, for us to understand that outrage is not enough. For ourselves, I have been given this task by the Honourable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, I believe because he knows my method of operation. The public can expect that Marco's alert will become active in a very short period of time. The public can expect that the Sexual Offenders Registry shall become a reality. I have said, and I do not understand that it would be useful for persons to mischaracterize what I have said, but we must consider the efficacy of everything that we do. We must consider the effectiveness of it. And where it is not effective, we must fix it. So the public can expect updated regulations with regard to Sexual Offenders Registry to address obvious shortcomings. As I have said yesterday, if it saves just one life, that is enough for me. The public would not be aware as to maybe the actual cause of death of little Bella, as the public would not be aware that this week a mother actually caused physical harm to the molester of her child, and the police reacted to it. So we need to be focused, and we need to have something a little more than outrage, as that mother physically defended her child. We must cease being just moved by outrage and, in fact, go past inertia to action. For my part, I've been appointed by the Honorable Prime Minister and I will not sit and talk or become outraged. I will act. To the issue at hand, I started saying that it was not controversial, and the actual provisions aren't controversial. But the characterizations on the other side requires some comment. It was said that we are doing a lot of what was previously done. And the strange thing about that, Madam Speaker, is that is perhaps accurate. But that then begs the question, if we can do what we are doing pursuant to the Health Services Act by regulations and rules, it leads to the inevitable conclusion that so could the previous government have acted. Marco City and East Grand Bahama pointed out quite eloquently how some of the provisions of the rules mirrors what would have been happening in the emergency order. The implication is we are under direct assertion was that we're exchanging the competent authority for the advisory committee. That may well be so. But again, it begs the question of why did the competent authority last beyond 3 months? One can give grace for an emergency, but now it is recognized that all that was done could have been done under existing legislation. And so that the public can be very clear, the minister to lay regulation must come to cabinet. The competent authority to make regulation, to make orders, did not have to come to cabinet. And so that is a marked distinction between what they did and what we are doing. And that is why I began by saying it is an aberration. A state of emergency is an aberration in democratic politics. And so that's just one distinction between what they did and what we are doing. And in fact, had they listened to the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, it would have been clear that that was a distinction. But just 2 quick notes, Madam Speaker, of what else is different. The advisory committee is in fact made up of medical persons because everyone speaks about following the science. Exuma could well remember when Exuma was closed and the competent authority says that it was based on medical advice, that the medical person said that they knew nothing of any medical reason why Exuma was still closed when other islands were open. The difference is that the advisory committee will advance only based on medical opinion, which would then be considered by the minister. And so, Madam Speaker, that is one difference. The next obvious difference that continues to be a problem is that under the emergency regime, there was complete unaccountability and a complete lack of transparency. We still wait to have tabled the report of the emergency spending. It was said that it did not have to happen. And in fact, it has not happened. Well, on this side, Madam Speaker, we are not exempting ourselves from any of the protections that the law provides for the people's money. And that is a real and notable difference. And so, Madam Speaker, it is heartening to know that there is no opposition to this bill. And so it can proceed, one would hope, unopposed. As the member for Tall Pines has said, this side has a different attitude, and we are receptive. We do not believe that we know everything. And so, as he has listened here today, the other side can be assured that we will continue to listen. In all things, be it issues of public safety in terms of crime, be it in issues of public safety and issues of health. We will work collaboratively in this new day to advance the interests of the Bahamian public. And so, Madam Speaker, it should be clear to all that the bill is necessary. The bill will address issues, and we will go forward, hopefully, with a lot less contention. If I may address one matter, Madam Speaker, and that was, while I was sitting here, persons sent queries by modern technology that they hadn't heard anything about vehicle licensing. Because one can remember that the emergency orders in the beginning suspended vehicle licenses until the conclusion of the emergency, the state of emergency. There is a view that that suspension ended May 2020 with the end of the first period. There is some debate over it. Being a lawyer as I am, we would know that anything is debatable. I can say, as the Minister of National Security, that as the police have in this year taken the position that they are enforcing insurance only, thereby representing that the suspension was still in place, that I have no expectation that that will change and that persons will have the 30 days after the end of the state of emergency to license their vehicle. I think that if any policeman were to do otherwise, it'll be the first time that I would transgress my position and purport to direct them to do something different. The people of the Bahamas acted on the basis that they had 30 days after the end of the state of emergency to license their vehicles. And for our part, we will not disappoint the legitimate expectation of our people.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair now recognizes the Honourable Member for East Cranbrook.
Madam Speaker, I just wanted to ask a question from the Minister for National Security. And thank you for that clarification. I believe there may be people who may have been ticketed already for not having licenses during this period, before you made that statement when there was a period of uncertainty. I don't know if there's going to be any consideration for those persons who what may have already paid. I don't even know if there could be any consideration for those persons who have already made payments. But I just make the inquiry.
As I hasten to say, when something is outside of my portfolio, public funds are outside of my portfolio, I would say, though, that it is clear that it should not happen. And I would expect going forward that it will not happen. And the public who will be listening would know that if it does happen, they can happily advise and it would be addressed.
Thank you, Honourable Members. As many, it has been moved and seconded that the bill be read a second time and committed. All those in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion has been carried. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the transition and consequences of the suspension of certain enactments under the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Special Provisions Order 2021.
Thank you. Further second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member.
Move that the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole. The Deputy Speaker in the chair.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable member. It has been moved and seconded that the House dissolves into the Committee of the Whole. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House will now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole. The Deputy Speaker will now take the chair.
Committee of the Whole. Honorable members for West, Grand Bahama, and Bimini.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to move for the passage of the following bill for the various sections of the bill. And the long title agreed. COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Bill 2021, a bill for an act to provide for the transition and the consequences of the suspension of certain enactments under the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Management and Recovery Special Provisions Order 2021. Be agreed.
Second. Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The long title bill is agreed.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, wish to move now for the short title to be agreed. COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Bill 2021. If I can obtain a seconder.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title be agreed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those are opposed will stand. The short title bill is agreed.
Thank you.
So just move it's 2 to 7.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I now wish to move that clauses 2 to 7 be agreed.
Second. Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 to 7 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor remain seated. Those who are opposed may stand. Article 2, clause 2 through 7 is agreed.
Deputy Speaker, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Second.
As many. It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. Okay. As many as are opposed, as many are in favor remain seated. Those who are opposed will stand. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I now move that the Speaker do take the chair.
It has been moved and seconded that the Speaker do now take the chair. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those who are opposed will stand. Madam Speaker will now take the chair. Okay. No amendments. That's right. I beg to report that the committee of the whole I beg leave to report that the committee of the whole has gone through the bill, having made no amendments.
Honorable members, the Deputy Speaker has reported that the committee has gone through the bill and made no amendment, and having made no amendments. Third reading and passing of bills.
Madam Speaker,
The chair recognizes the
I
honorable
now
member
move
for
that
West
the bill in its
Oklahoma.
entirety be passed.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable member. It has been moved and seconded that the bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The order that the bill be read a third time.
A bill for an act to provide for the transition and consequences of suspension of certain enactments under the emergency powers COVID-19 pandemic, management and recovery special provisions order 2020.
Order that the bill do now pass and the title declared to be the COVID-19 Pandemic Special Provisions Bill 2021. For the third reading and passing of bills.
None, sir. None, madam. Sorry.
Consideration of Senate's amendments. Resolutions. Member statements. Appointment of select committees. Instructions to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to renew all notices and in the name of the government.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Adjournment.
Madam Speaker, I now move that the House adjourns to Monday, November 15th, 2021 at 10 a.m.
Monday. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the House at its rising do adjourn at 10 a.m. on Monday, 15th of November, 2021. All those are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Final adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House now adjourns to Monday, November 15th at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House stands adjourned to Monday, 15th of November, 2021 at 10 a.m.
All rise.